welcome back to the long-anticipated return of my Versus series. Now, basically, for those of you who are new to my channel, name pretty much sums it up. It lives up to its namesake. I take two things, be it bands, albums, video games, video game characters, and whatnot, and just pit them against each other to decide which one comes out on top. Now, basically getting into it, this is a brand new season for the Versus series with an all-new title card, everything. So this is basically just picking up where I left off. Now, the first thing that I'm going to compare is really tough for me. Probably one of the most hard comparisons that I've had to make on Versus yet. And that is exactly why I chose it to start off the second season, Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation 1. Now, admittedly, I did not grow up with either of these systems, but I've had access to the PS1 via my PS2 and PS3, and access to Nintendo 64 via emulation and an ex-friend's house. Somewhat, sometimes. So, basically, getting into it, I do like the PlayStation 1 just a little better. See, it was even hard for me to say, because these two systems are just neck and neck, just close to each other in terms of how great they are. Now, I usually judge based on how many games they have that I like, but if the system breaks down, if the system's, technically not as good as the other one, you gotta factor that in somewhere as well. So, getting into the specs, I believe the PS1 is less apt or less technically advanced than the N64, as the N64 came out, I believe 2 years later. PS1 surfaced in '94, basically when SNES was taking its stride. So it's a 32-bit based system and had basically side-scrollers such as Mega Man X4. Awesome game. So, while the Nintendo 64 came out 2 years later, it was basically with its time and could produce graphics, polygonal graphics, in games like Super Mario 64, Super Smash Bros., which came later, Ocarina of Time, and the like. So, basically, the N64 and the PS1 are kind of neck and neck in that department, because even though the PS1 is a 32-bit based system, as far as I know, it can still produce graphics like the N64, albeit a little bit more pixelated. So there's a definite graphical degradation when comparing the N64 and the PS1, but it's not that big of a gap, I suppose. And it's not one that you'll just continuously notice unless you're looking deep at it with a fine-tooth comb and a magnifying glass. So, when it comes to control and the natural feel, I would say the PlayStation's definitely got it. Sony has definitely got the control down. They have been using the same thing ever since their inception, but, they added a few things. Like, this is a PS3 controller right here, obviously. Here's a PS2 controller. I don't have a PS1 controller because I don't own a PlayStation 1. So, see how it has like the little analog thing, and they replaced that with the PS button. Still got the same thing, start, select right here. Same basic layout. I often confuse these two controls because they look so identical. Now, the PS1 control is basically the same thing. The first one didn't have analog control, so they added that in midway through the life cycle of the PS1. And the PS1 controls were all a little bit of a lighter grayish color before switching to black with the PS2. So there's a few differences there, here and there. The joysticks here, the analog sticks, were rounded off to make it a little bit more comfortable for the thumbs. So they made a lot of advancements. They made a lot of improvements. Whereas the N64, they just stuck with the same controller throughout. And me personally, I'm not a fan of it. As I said, I did not grow up with these systems, and I didn't really get the chance to play an N64 until around 2009, and that was over at a friend's house, an ex-friend now. But anyways, I played a little bit of Gauntlet Legends and Super Smash Bros., as well as some Ocarina of Time for like 10 minutes, but I barely got past the first level. So I still have memories from the emulation, and that still holds a lot of nostalgic value towards me because I have beaten a lot of games. So the games themselves are gold. They're superb. I absolutely love it. But the control, when actually like controlling it on the legit system, needs a lot of work. I mean, it's really awkward to hold it in your hand and be messing around with the joystick when you got the the D-pad, dialogue and analog, I suppose, but the D-pad on one end, and you got 3 holders, which is really weird. And I suppose it was supposed to be some ergonomic design to be like comfortable, but it just ends up feeling weird and contrived. So the controller definitely needs work, and they definitely made a little bit better with the GameCube, but the GameCube controller still a little rough around the edges. It's still really confusing, especially with the C stick versus the C buttons, but that's in a whole nother video. That's a whole nother topic. So the controller is definitely better with the PS1, especially since they had to go through several revisions to perfect it. And as far as the games, though, they're pretty neck and neck. I mean, you know, on one hand, you got the N64 with Ocarina of Time, Super Mario 64, Super Smash Brothers, what's another one? Majora's Mask, Star Fox 64, Pilot Wings 64. You got a shit ton of games here. Perfect Dark. How did I miss Perfect Dark? That's one of my favorite first-person shooters. GoldenEye 007. And then you got, you know, over here, you know, on the PlayStation 1 with Crash Bandicoot, Spyro, Metal Gear Solid, Final Fantasy 7 and 8. Not too big of a fan of 8, though. And you just got a ton of them. Turok was released for both. PS1, the version for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater was a little bit better for PS1, in my opinion, just because of the controls. They just felt a little bit more natural, I suppose. But it had a lot going for it. Both systems were just neck and neck during this time period. Sega, on the other hand, was just kind of left out on the wayside with their so-called Sega Saturn that kind of bombed and paved the way for the Dreamcast to bomb as well. So, anyways, getting into it, personally, I don't know which one I like better, but at this point, I'm kind of leaning towards the PlayStation 1 just because of all the, you know, the sheer amount of games it has in its library. I'm still discovering more games for it. And it's just, there's so many different series, and even though there's a little bit of a graphical degradation, it really doesn't make that much of a difference to me, anyways. The controls feel natural, and, you know, aside from it not having Ocarina of Time, it's pretty stellar. So, like I said, I'm more of a Sony guy. I've liked pretty much every single Sony system ever since their inception, you know, but I'm not blind to the things they've done wrong. So, you know, we'll see what the PS4 has in store for it, because, like I said, right now, as this video is being recorded, the PS3 is the newest Sony system. So, they made a lot of revisions since the PS1, and, well, most of them have been for the greater good. Nintendo, on the other hand, have moved towards, you know, family-oriented casual gaming. So, as of now, the Xbox has moved in its place, because Nintendo used to be more hardcore style with the first-person shooters, but now they've kind of stepped aside and let Xbox and Microsoft take the reins. So, we'll see how that goes, and we'll see how Nintendo fares in this generation to come. So, they're already kind of got a head start, but not much of one. So we'll see how that goes. As far as the N64 versus the PS1, though, PS1. So that's really all I have to say. It was so close. It was so hard for me to decide, and I was rooting for N64 until around like a year ago when I finally discovered all of the games for the PS1 and just how great the control felt compared to other systems, compared to the N64. So, I leave you with this. Which one do you guys like better? Comment down below. I would love to hear your opinions. If you disagree with me, great. If you agree with me, great. Either way, this is Midnight Strike 3625, and as always, keep calm and rock on.